You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
Yes. I know you've had a particularly
Yes.
challenging week. And if you want to share what's going on with you, I know we talked about it in Clubhouse a little bit.
We did. On Sunday, I was informed that my mother had passed. And it was unfortunate because she was a bit estranged. And so going through that, dealing with it, talking to family members, in addition to the things that are my daily life, has certainly brought a lot of, I would say, added stress, not turmoil, but added stress. And it's a fact of life and part of life.
Yeah. Unfortunately, death is part of life. And, going through recovering, going through sobriety, you're going to hit challenging times. It's going to be tough. And, that's what our first segment is about here, is staying sober during difficult times. Because I will tell you, Kristina, like, it is difficult times out there. I mean, and, you're going through something very big.
Yes.
But just the average person, I looked today, Orange County, where you're at, I saw it was $7 something a gallon or something.
Yes.
For gas. And I mean, like, some people that are listening to this say, well, how is that difficult times? But, look, if you're on a tight budget, or you're, economically, it's really tough for people. I mean, I know people who are very well off, and even economically for them, they've had to make changes.
Well, we're in the middle of such turmoil in regards to the gas prices. It could be the difference of somebody having a meal or not because of the increase. And I feel like it's super important to recognize, even if you don't have something big like what's kind of going on with me, the entire world, the ethos out there, the vibration is absolutely turned up. And this is the time for us to double down on our self-care and our recovery programs.
Well, domestically and internationally, every time you turn on the news, it is chaos, right? You see death, despair, murder, everything, crime, everything, homelessness. I know I've talked about this in Los Angeles, that, the homeless, it's really an epidemic here. Like, we really have it's very depressing. You go out of your house and you finally get out with the whole COVID thing, the whole lockdown, and you just want to go drive down the street, maybe get a cup of coffee or something. And you run right into it, right?
Absolutely.
The despair of it.
Yes.
And us being in recovery, we know that a lot of people that are trapped in homelessness are also trapped in addiction.
Yes.
So that brings on another layer for us.
It really does. And this is an opportunity in some ways because we can band together. It's one of the things I love about Recovered Life is that we realize that the addiction is a disease, or, that's the beginning of our ability to say, okay, I'm going to get sober now. And it's treatable, but we have to stick together. The one thing, when I got the phone call about my mother's passing, and there's, a big story behind it, I knew exactly what to do because I had been practicing that for a long time.
Yes.
I knew to let the feelings come. I knew not to judge them. And I also knew to pick up the phone and call 3 different people and tell them, this just happened.
Yes.
This is what I have to deal with. This is what I'm feeling. And it was because of that habit of picking up the phone and talking to people. And I think many of us kind of maybe got away from that habit in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so
I know I did.
You did?
I know I did. I was on the phone yesterday. I had my men's group that I have, and I was on the phone yesterday for a period of time, just talking with people. And, one of the things that I had mentioned is that, I feel a little isolated,
Yes.
when things go bad in the world, and you turn on and everything you see is catastrophe.
Yes.
You start to absorb that. We were talking about that on Clubhouse yesterday.
Absolutely.
About how, so much of recovery is a consciousness, right? It's a consciousness.
It is. And we are sensitive people, those of us who are in recovery and those who are fighting active addictions. And we are incredibly sensitive. Even the big burly man who maybe doesn't appear is still very, very sensitive. And the vibration that's out there, it can feel like a dull ache, a confused, I don't know why I don't feel well. My problems aren't big enough to call somebody. That's the opposite of what you should be doing. You need to call and reach out to people and connect.
Absolutely. And, you really do, because The thing is that isolation causes more despair and difficult times. I find when you start talking about it, things start to evaporate a little bit.
They do.
They start to evaporate, and things start to see, well, you start to see good things as well as the bad things. And I think that's what I wanted to say here, because I know a lot of people listening to the show, and this is not just for people who are new. I mean, I know a lot of people who 20, 30 years are sitting in the room. They have a decade of sobriety. They're sitting in the room and they're trying to be positive, but they're in the back and they're like saying, you know what? I don't feel great about the state of where things at. And, and I think especially with 12-step groups, in LA, a lot of these 12-step groups have been kind of eliminated because of COVID.
They've dissipated. And one more note back to the phone call. It's also amazingly important for the person who receives the call. For that reminder, that touch point. And a lot of options have been taken away. And it's not as if you intended. I remember when the pandemic first started and my meeting was taken away in person, and we had a Marco Polo group so we could connect and have daily life talks. Thank God for technology in some ways, because it really helped me stay connected. And for those people that are newer, it is incredibly important. I've had a lot of time, but I could easily slip away and start having that constant anxiety, that dull ache of sadness. And there are ways to not necessarily solve the problem, but there are ways to not feel alone, like you're shouldering everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the whole thing, is realizing that you're not alone, building that infrastructure of people around you. And look, a lot of I've realized, Kristina, that the old ways of being able to go to a Saturday meeting, be able to come a half an hour early, get coffee, see people, have a donut, sit down, talk with the newcomer, then go to fellowship after, like a couple hour experience.
Right.
That experience is not, that was so easy for me.
Right.
But that experience is not available anymore for me. Right. Like, it's not even me choosing. It's just not available. And this comes down to this whole thing: when things are difficult, lack of power.
Yes.
It's that whole thing of lack of power. I don't have power or control over this situation.
Right. And we don't, but we do have the power to connect with somebody. And, not going to meetings is only the tip of the iceberg. Once you've been in recovery for a while, you actually you do life with each other. And I don't want anybody to feel like, well, it's been going on a long time. Why haven't I adjusted? It's important to absolutely reach out and say, I just need to know what's going on in your life. This is what's going on in my life, and get that support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? It is really about that support. What other things do you use in difficult times? What things do you fall back on, Kristina, that you've come to live with as part of your daily routine?
It is. I have some really good boundaries with my time, which is important, but I also have good boundaries with my disciplines, and I often will schedule 15 minutes in between work calls to go outside, to ground myself, to sit in the sunshine, to be inside my body. I also do a lot of sighing, which sounds kind of like, a sigh, it has such negative connotation, but it's so important for our nervous system to integrate. And the sigh can do that. It touches the vagus nerve. Journaling, stream of conscious journaling, sometimes even bullet point journaling, so that I'm actually taking agency with my thoughts. And I'm not just running, floating down the stream. I'm actually recognizing what's happening. Prayer, meditation, things like this. I found the entire world online, the world of recovery online, and it has been very, very helpful for me to be reminded, that I still have power over what I choose to do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is what do you have power over?
Right.
And what don't you have power over? That's the whole thing. And being able to discern the difference. I know that seems like totally stupid, because that's like the serenity prayer, right? That's so basic, as the kids say. But you know what? It is basic. It is the basics. When things get difficult, I know for me, I go back to the building blocks. Hey, and I go right back to the very beginning building blocks. It's like, do I have enough food to eat? Yes. Did I eat it? Yes, I'm fine. Does everybody around me, are they okay? Yes. Okay. Do I have a place to sleep? Yes. Okay. And then I start looking, okay, what blessings, what good things, what blessings do I have in my life today? Oh, I have people around me. I have people that love me. I have people, right? It's like, I have a job. I have income. I have a business, right? Like all that stuff, you have to start, I just piece it together right from the central core of I'm awake, aware, and alive, right?
Yes.
Like it's so important.
It is. And getting in your body, being able to recognize here and now, that increases your serotonin so much. And, we've talked a lot about dopamine, and there are things that were taken away, projects that had to be put on hold. There was some absence of dopamine because it was very sleepy. And so exercising and cultivating the other chemicals can help so much with people's anxiety. Hugging yourself, hugging if you are not alone, your partner, playing with your dog, taking a shower. That is a huge one for adjusting the vagus nerve. Touching here. This is why I always touch here, because you're integrating. And you said basics. Am I food? Am I fed? Have I drank water? That's a very simple thing.
Absolutely.
Do I have a place to stay? Remembering all that, focusing on the positives that are in your life.
Well, you know what? That is really what it's about. It's like to dial that back, also to tap into a community. Recovered Life is a great way to do that, because I just sometimes log on and I look at some of the comments.
Yes.
And look, I think the big takeaway is when you find out that things aren't going as you expected, right? Because that's with me. It's like, well, I didn't expect it. I wanted this outcome. I didn't want this outcome. Right. This is where it gets very, very challenging. And excuse me real quick, I have a little technical issue. Kristina, your mic, you might need to move it because I think your hair was like, sorry about that, guys.
That hair.
We're on a shoestring budget here. It's just causing some feedback on the stuff. We're on a shoestring. We're doing this like 1 minute at a time here with the producer.
That's right.
But when things don't go as planned, that's when the problem is, because I'm like, well, it should have gone this way. Why didn't it go this way? It should have gone this way. What I find is it limits. We were talking about this with your mom, the situation that you've got with your mom yesterday is like, you've got all this stuff that's coming up that you have to do.
Yes.
And that causes dread. It's like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know. And then you start to write these outcomes. Well, it needs to come out like this. It needs to come out like that. And this is where I feel that most people, and when I say most people, I mean me, most people lose the miracle, right, is because they're so busy trying to script the outcome that they leave no room for a higher power to come in and make things right.
It's yes, nothing more like what I'm going through this week would come in line with that thinking. What can you do? What can I do? A lot of times when I'm working with somebody and we're in a panic, it is, stopping and saying, what is it that you can do today? The first is always take care of yourself. Otherwise, you won't have anything to give anyone. And the second one is really, what do I have power over? What can I do? I can make that phone call. My mother lived in another state. And so a lot of the family members are trying to figure that out, and being able to be the person, because we all go through this, whether you're an addict or not, that lack of power, being the person, because of my recovery program, to say, okay, first things first. Is everybody taking care of themselves? We don't all have to rush in there. Let's figure out who has the resources and the time to do so. And that can be brought into our own lives. What can you do today? We cannot solve the pandemic. And
the key is also to identify what can't you do. Right?
There you go.
You can't run in like, as a codependency expert, you can't go in and save it. You can't make people feel better all the time. You can't do that. Right. So the thing is to identify that bit. The hard part for me always has been is like, okay, I can identify what I can't change. Right. But then I start to say, it's like, well, I can't drop it. Like I can't let it go. Right. Like, because I'm like, well, it shouldn't be that way. And maybe I could change it. Well, what if I do this? And I start rearranging the deck chairs. Right. And that doesn't work.
I love that.
That doesn't work.
I love that image. I have something that, in the 12-step program, our step 3 is turning our life and our will over. And I realized that if I have an attachment to outcome, then I'm in my own will. Of course, there are things that we have to do first, but if I have an attachment to the outcome, then I am running wild in my own will. And being able to recognize that and just say, oh, I'm taking a break.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm taking a break.
Absolutely. Taking a break. And that is, those are words to live by. And I have to tell you, and so many people right now, it is difficult times. And I think just the acknowledgement is that it's difficult.
Right.
Like, it's not easy right now. It's difficult, and
Yes.
it's hard, and it's hard for me to do this or whatever. Just acknowledging it out loud or telling somebody, it's like, hey, you know what? This is difficult, I think, is really the step to move towards, some sort of healing and being
Yes.
able to kind of live with what's going on.
Absolutely. Recognizing your feelings gives you clues on the next decision. So
Absolutely.
we have to be able to do that and accept it. That's where the acceptance comes in. Accept that you're feeling, in my case, sad or,
Yeah.
in despair. Accept it and not judge yourself about those feelings, and really, really taking the time to connect the dots. It is the first step in everybody's
Well,
life.
we wanted to do this segment because we know that, we've heard this from people that we work with, that everybody feels it in the air,
Yes.
right? And I think people that are in recovery are much more sensitive than we lead on, right? Like,
Right.
we could feel it. Like, we know when things aren't. I could hear it in Clubhouse yesterday. People were nervous,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
People are like, well, you know what? Am I going to be able to afford what I used to afford? Am I going to
Right.
be able to do what I used to be able to do? And that brings fear, right? And like, so we have to understand too that we're sensitive and we're receptors. So we got to put ourselves around positive people who
We
can
do.
who can really change that vibrational energy for us.